Some say back in the days of our hunter-gatherer ancestors past, we lived a peaceful, egalitarian life, unburdened by the territorial behavior farming brought to secure water and fertile flatland and competition for resources that lead to a sedimentary lifestyle. Something assumed until we dug and dug some more, uncovering the whirlwinds of the past, coalescing into the soup of today. What was uncovered was evidence of violence, when land and resources were plentiful, when it was easier to avoid encounters than stumble upon them during the days of an extremely low population living in prehistoric Ice Age Europe, 530,000 years ago. Northern Spain's Atapuerca Mountains lies the Cima de los Huesos, or Pit of Bones, in a cave only accessible through a 13-meter vertical shaft, contains the remains of at least 28 people in a single hand axe. There lies a skull in 52 fragments, 430,000 years old, called cranium 17. When reconstructed, it exhibited 2 distinct fractures above the left eye. Forensic analysis suggests these injuries were inflicted by 2 separate blows from the same object, a wooden spear out a stone hand axe. The absence of healing supports the conclusion that he was murdered, making it one of the earliest known cases of homicide in the human fossil record. 35 to 45,000 years ago, in Shanidar Cave in Iraq, lies a Neanderthal called Shanidar III, an individual found with a partially healed deep wound on his 9th rib, indicating a possible murder or attempted murder that could have taken weeks until death. It likely collapsed his lung. From a downward trajectory, a sharp point penetrated his rib, a knife or an arrow. If it was an arrow, it would be the oldest indirect evidence for the bow and arrow in Europe, and the oldest evidence of conflict between 2 species of human, Neanderthal, and early Western hunter-gatherer. Some know him as cro-magnon, or modern man. But what about for species directly? In 1991, 2 hikers on the Italian border high in the Alps, a chilling discovery was made. What was first thought to be a lost mountaineer turned out to be more than 5,000 years old, a man we call Otzi. He scoured up the mountain slopes, not daring to slow. Behind him, a man takes steady aim with his bow, hitting Otzi in the left shoulder, severing an artery, and likely bleed out in minutes. Was it a feud, revenge? His arrows had 3 different blood types on it. Archaeologists discovered a site from around the same time burned to the ground in the foothills. Strontium isotope ratios found in his teeth corresponded to the same general geographical area. He had a copper axe, a rare and powerful tool. Heavy metal ratios in his hair may imply he was a metal smith. He was an important man, maybe a chieftain. The discovery of his axe pushed back the start of the Copper Age by roughly 1,000 years. His DNA shows him to be almost purely Neolithic Anatolian farmer, who were the second wave of migrants into Europe about 7,000 years ago. Also around that time at Schöneck, Kilian, Germany, 26 individuals suffered violent deaths. From every age and sex, died from blunt force and arrow wounds, many with lower limb fractures, like they might have been debilitated. The absence of younger women hints to possible abduction. Also at around that time, at the Telheim death pit in Germany contained skeletons from 34 people, indiscriminate of sex or age. Evidence of arrow and adze use, and many have had execution-style blows to the head. Another from 5,000 years ago in Austria is the Scheitz Aspern site, with over 200 individuals who died of blunt force trauma, the haphazard disposal in a ditch, along with the presence of fortifications, implies a hostile environment with ruthless enemies. 2880 BC, the Kościce mass grave in Poland, 15 with fatal blows to the head, carefully arranged with rich grave goods, such as ceramics, flint tools, amber ornaments, animal bones. DNA shows they belong to a large extended family group. Adult males weren't present, leading researchers to hypothesize they were away during the attack and later returned and buried their families. During this time was the expansion of the corded ware culture and migrations from the Pontic steppe. None of the victims had steppe ancestry, suggesting potential conflict over resources or territory. Intergroup tension during the dawn of the Bronze Age, again around 5,000 years ago. A dangerous period, it seems, in Europe. The Korsor, Norse site in Denmark, are remains of 7. One had a flint knife by his side. and his cranium showed a scar from a powerful blow he survived. Another one in Denmark 1,000 years later, one of the three found together was found with a bone point, dying from an arrow. Two from around 7,000 years ago, the first in Germany, had 9 mostly males who were non-local, suffered blows to the back of the head. Maybe they were moving into a new territory. Maybe they were in a band and were raided. And the women and children taken? Maybe they were POWs from afar or failed raiders. What ideas do you got? About them or the early Neolithic era, the Anatolians were moving into Europe en masse, becoming the dominant demographic, especially in southern Europe. For now. The second one is in the Spanish Pyrenees, in the deepest chamber of a cave. Archaeologists discovered 13 individuals of all ages and sex with blows to the back of the head. Strontium isotope analysis of teeth shows several were not local, coming from farther north. Most were related. Maybe this was the beginning of the fight for arable soil, fresh water or grazing land, or the fight to keep it. In Africa, it's much harder to keep organic evidence for us to study the lives and deaths of our ancestors from the cradle of our human past. 10,000 years ago in Kenya, near a lake called Turkana, one of the oldest forms of evidence for intergroup conflict, 27 skeletons, all sex and ages, most showing signs of a violent end. From skull fractures to arrow wounds, some bound like a heavily pregnant woman, proving this site to be one of long conflict. 13 to 14,000 years ago, Jebel Sahaba, Nubia, in the late Pleistocene, more than 60 hunter-gatherers lay in a cemetery. 40% had clear signs of violence, and keep in mind for this time period only 5 to 15% of bones that had trauma would show evidence for it. They were mostly riddled with arrows, and some had defensive wounds. Many had multiple injuries, and even signs of healing from a previous one. The bones were multi-generational, proving this an old site for conflict going back maybe 100 years with this group. One of the oldest, most important and mysterious prehistoric crimes was discovered in a cave in Romania in 1941, Clocovina Calvaria, dating to 33,000 years old. A skull was found in a phosphate mine from the Aurignacian culture, known for their cave art, symbolism, and masterful stone tools. What drove brutality in the prehistoric past? When people were sparse in a vast landscape, land was plentiful and animals were abundant. Was survival that hard, that every little advantage was necessary to live? Was territory fiercely defended? Was revenge absolute in its resolve? The start of many enduring conflicts that spiral into long-lasting hostilities. No one even remembers how it got started. Was life so disposable in our ruthless efforts for survival and relevance that others were insignificant in the path to survive one more day? Jealousy is an emotion long older than can be imagined. Some argue that jealousy, greed, hostility are socially taught, social constructs influencing our state, rather than human nature, evolutionarily driven to survive under certain conditions. Cultural and societal motives. Anthropologists have studied isolated Amazonian tribes in the rainforest who were culturally sexually open, and the conclusions have significant implications on the insights of human nature. The Yanomami from southern Venezuela and northern Brazil are culturally very open sexually and exercise polygyny, men with multiple women, and polyandry, women with multiple men, generally shared access. Jealousy and violent disputes were common. Raids, revenge killings, and fighting over women were well documented by anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon. Reviews suggest jealous violence and mate guarding are biologically hardwired. Emotional possessiveness and competition remain strong. Could this cultural practice have started as a conflict resolution in the form of pre-crime to end certain disputes before they can start, making it not socially acceptable to commit violence and jealous revenge? Other isolated rainforest tribes show similar patterns. The Canela in Brazil had communal, explicit relations during festivals and certain rites. Jealousy was present, even when cultural norms allowed for multiple partners, suggesting it's not a purely learned behavior, especially outside of ritual contexts. The Aish in Paraguay, again, had flexible patterns in terms for intimate relations with multiple men. Those who had relations at the time of pregnancy would partake in raising a child. The Bari from Colombia and Venezuela also, in spite of cultural norms for multiple partners, They too exhibited emotional reactions like jealousy, suggesting it's not just cross-cultural but partly innate. There are contributing factors that support or diminish the facilitation for warfare. In a study put out by Douglas Fry and Patrick Soderberg, the study of lethal aggression in 21 mobile forager bands and implications for the origin of war. There are contributing factors that support or diminish the facilitation for warfare. As it pertains to smaller grouped mobile hunting foragers, their group size is too small to support warfare. Egocentric social networks with a decent, generally bilaterally, through both parental lines also doesn't facilitate coalitional alliances useful in war. Group composition fluctuates over time, so kinship and social networks interweave across different groups. They don't tend to be patrilocal. They're multi-local, meaning they're not bound to a specific locality. They lack a residential pattern that facilitates male coalitions useful in war. Leadership is lacking. No one has authority to order others to fight. Foraging areas are large with a low population density. With spread out resources, defending territory isn't practical or possible. Boundaries were usually socially controlled by request and permission granting. Typical spoils of war, material goods, stored food, was non-existent. The necessity for mobility largely made the kidnapping for slaves or brides difficult. Conspecific killing in mammals between the same species is infrequent, mostly being threats and restrained aggression, might have an evolutionary relationship to us. What they found was that out of 21 mobile hunter-forager societies, there was 148 lethal events. One group was disproportionate in results than the others, and averaging them and would be significant in offsetting the numbers of the remaining 20. The Tiwi of Australia were an outlier for their exceptional increase in fatalities. They had 44% of the one-on-ones, with a large number of fatalities, compared to the other 20 combined, coming to 64%. 4% were women. The Tiwi also were responsible for 3/4 of the conflicts between different groups. On average, 55% were one-on-one. 23% of the time, it was more than one against one, and 22% of the time, it was more than one over more than one. In only one instance did one man kill more than one. 85% of the time, it was within the same society. The reasons mirror modern industrial societies in some ways. 6% was between a man and wife. Many were over women, 2 men fighting over wives and each other's wives. Even premeditated instances like helping in the dispatch of a friend's wife's lover. Some other reasons was stealing. The stealing of honey in particular was stated in the report. Also insults, taunting, self-defense, and protecting others. In general, 62% were non-warring. Interestingly, all of the equestrian societies made war, possibly because territory was now easily covered and dominated by the speed and power of the horse. It would be easier to overpower and run down enemies or those whose territories they want to take. It happens to correlate with the vast areas covered by migratory Proto-Indo-Europeans and the dominance of their language, technology, religion, culture, and genetic contributions. This study is disjointed from the previous studies of isolated peoples. Bowles, an earlier researcher, examined 8 societies. 6 were mobile foraging societies. He recorded war in all 8 societies. The differences are likely due to things like, how do you define war? The difference in sampling and composition. Some things are hard to factor under the category of war, like the killing of trespassers, or those who were shipwrecked. Some reasons for external conflicts between groups are also personal, and groups team up for revenge. In a world of anarchy and void of social structure, we'll never know all the secrets of the past. When individuals moved through the land by their own rules, without fear of repercussions or shame, emotionally driven, at least at first, in its purest forms. The reasons aren't always so surprising or different than what we see today. Linked to our past, we're evolutionarily hardwired towards the survival of our offspring, even by way of ruthless measures.